The gold wedding band slipped from Sarah Zimmerman's trembling finger into the grimy palm of her landlord, and she felt the last piece of her heart break along with it. It was the only thing she had left of Thomas, her husband of 2 years who had died 6 months ago in a mine collapse outside Nome, Alaska, and now even that was gone, surrendered to pay 3 months of overdue rent on the tiny room above the general store, where she had been barely surviving through the brutal winter of 1897. "This ought to cover what you owe me," Silas Drummond said, his yellowed teeth showing through a cruel smile as he examined the simple gold band in the late morning light filtering through the cracked window. He was a thin, wiry man with a perpetual sneer and a reputation for being the most ruthless landlord in Nome. "Barely. You have until the end of the week to come up with next month's rent, or you are out on the street, widow or not." Sarah stood in the center of her sparse room, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple braid, her green eyes red from crying but dry now because she had no more tears left. She was 23 years old and felt like she had aged a decade in the past half year. The Alaska Territory was unforgiving to anyone, but especially to a woman alone with no family and no means of support. She had tried to find work, but the few respectable positions available had gone to women with connections or skills she did not possess. The dance halls would have hired her, but she could not bring herself to work in such places. Not yet, though she knew her options were running out. After Drummond left, pocketing her ring with satisfaction, Sarah sank onto the narrow bed that took up most of the small room. The iron frame creaked under her weight, and she stared at the water-stained ceiling, wondering how her life had come to this. She and Thomas had come to Alaska full of hope, drawn by stories of gold and opportunity. He had been a good man, strong and kind, and they had been happy even in the difficult conditions. Then the mine had claimed him, along with 7 other men, and Sarah had been left with nothing but debts and a wedding ring. Now she did not even have that. She forced herself to stand, to move, because staying still meant drowning in despair. She pulled on her worn coat and wrapped a knitted shawl around her shoulders before heading down the narrow stairs to the street below. Nome in March was still locked in winter's grip, though the days were growing longer. The streets were a mix of frozen mud and packed snow, lined with rough wooden buildings that had sprung up almost overnight during the gold rush. The town had a raw, unfinished quality, as if it might disappear as quickly as it had appeared. Sarah walked with no destination in mind, just needing to be away from that room and the ghost of her wedding ring. She passed the assay office, the saloons that never seemed to close, the hotels where miners with fresh gold stayed for a night of comfort before heading back to their claims. The wind coming off the Bering Sea was sharp and cold, and she pulled her shawl tighter. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost walked straight into the man coming out of the trading post. "Steady there," a deep voice said, and large hands gripped her shoulders, keeping her from stumbling backward into the street. Sarah looked up and up, because the man was easily over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway behind him. He had dark hair that fell past his collar, a thick beard, and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered and tanned despite the winter, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. He wore heavy furs and buckskin, and there was a rifle slung across his back. "I am sorry," Sarah said quickly, stepping back. "I was not paying attention." The man studied her for a moment with those gray eyes, and Sarah felt uncomfortably exposed under his gaze, as if he could see right through to all her troubles. "You all right, miss?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "I am fine," Sarah lied, because what else could she say to a stranger? "Excuse me." She moved to step around him, but he spoke again. "You are the widow Zimmerman, are you not? Thomas Zimmerman's wife?" Sarah stopped and turned back to him, surprised. "You knew my husband?" "Met him a few times at the mining camps. He was a good man. I was sorry to hear about the collapse." The stranger shifted the bundle of supplies he was carrying. "Name is Nathan Ashford. I have a claim up in the mountains, come down to town for provisions every few weeks." "Sarah Zimmerman," she said, though he already knew that. She studied him more carefully now. Nathan Ashford had the look of a man who was completely at home in the wilderness, all lean muscle and quiet confidence. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard every day. There was something about him that made her feel both nervous and strangely safe at the same time. "Are you sure you are all right?" Nathan asked again. "You look like you could use a hot meal. There is a decent place down the street that serves real coffee, not the burnt sludge they serve in most of the saloons." Sarah should have declined. She barely knew this man, and proper widows did not accept invitations from strange men, even in a place as rough as Nome. But she was so tired of being alone, so tired of being cold and hungry and scared, that she found herself nodding. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Ashford." "Nathan," he corrected, and there was the hint of a smile beneath his beard. "Mr. Ashford makes me sound like a banker, and I am about as far from a banker as a man can get." The restaurant, if it could be called that, was a small building with rough plank walls and a handful of mismatched tables. But it was warm inside, with a good fire burning in a barrel stove, and the smell of cooking food made Sarah's stomach clench with hunger. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Nathan guided her to a table near the back and called out an order to the tired-looking woman manning the kitchen. "So," Nathan said once they were settled, "what has got you looking so lost? And do not say nothing." "Because I have spent enough time around people to know when something is weighing heavy on someone." Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with her need to tell someone, anyone, about what had happened. In the end, exhaustion won. "My landlord took my wedding ring this morning," she said quietly. "For back rent. It was the last thing I had of Thomas." Nathan's expression darkened, his jaw tightening beneath his beard. "Drummond?" "Yes. Do you know him?" "Everyone knows Drummond. He is a snake who preys on people when they are down." Nathan leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "That ring meant something to you." "Everything," Sarah said, and her voice broke slightly. "It was all I had left, and now it is gone, and I still owe him money, and I do not know what I am going to do." The woman brought out 2 plates of stew and thick slices of bread, along with cups of steaming coffee. Sarah ate mechanically at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what real food tasted like. Nathan ate in silence, but she could feel him watching her, thinking. "How much do you owe him?" Nathan asked finally. Sarah looked up from her nearly empty plate. "I could not ask you for money. You have already been too kind." "I am not offering money," Nathan said. "Not exactly, but I am curious about the situation. How much?" 3 months back rent, which was $15, and he wants another $5 by the end of the week for next month. $20 might as well have been $1,000 for all her ability to pay it. He said the ring was worth the 15, but I do not think he gave me fair value for it. "He did not," Nathan said flatly. "A gold wedding band is worth more than $15, especially now with gold prices what they are. Drummond is cheating you, and he knows it." Sarah had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her feel even worse. "It does not matter now. It is done." "Maybe not," Nathan said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. "Where does Drummond keep his office?" "He has rooms above the saloon on Front Street." "Why?" Nathan did not answer directly. Instead, he finished his coffee and stood. "Wait here. I need to go have a conversation with your landlord." "Nathan, no," Sarah said, standing as well. "You cannot confront him. He has friends, rough men who work for him. You will only make trouble for yourself." "I have dealt with rough men before," Nathan said, and there was steel in his voice. "Stay here, finish your coffee. I will be back soon." Before she could protest further, he was gone, moving with surprising speed for such a large man. Sarah sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. She did not know what Nathan intended to do, but she had a feeling it was not going to be a polite conversation. Part of her wanted to run after him, to stop him from doing something reckless on her behalf. Another part of her, the part that had been beaten down by months of grief and hardship, desperately hoped he could somehow fix this. She waited, nursing her coffee, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. The restaurant's proprietor, a stout woman named Mrs. Chen who had come from San Francisco, refilled her cup without being asked and gave her a sympathetic look. "That Nathan Ashford is a good man," Mrs. Chen said. "Strong as an ox and twice as stubborn. If anyone can help you, it is him." "You know him?" Sarah asked. "Everyone who has been in Nome more than a season knows Nathan. He keeps to himself mostly up in the mountains, but when he comes to town, people notice. He does not start trouble, but he does not back down from it either." Mrs. Chen wiped down the table next to them. "There was an incident last year where some men tried to jump his claim. They ended up tied to a tree for the marshal to find. Nathan did not kill them, but they wished he had by the time he was done with them." This should have frightened Sarah, but instead, she felt a strange sense of relief. If Nathan was as tough as Mrs. Chen suggested, maybe he really could help her get her ring back. Time crawled by. Sarah finished her second cup of coffee and was starting to seriously worry when the door opened and Nathan walked in. He was alone and there was no blood or visible signs of a fight, which she took as a good sign. In his hand, he held something small that glinted in the light. He walked straight to her table and opened his palm. There, nestled in his calloused hand, was her wedding ring. Sarah gasped and reached for it with shaking fingers. What did you?" "Let us just say Drummond and I came to an understanding," Nathan said, his voice grim. "He will not be bothering you for rent anymore." Sarah slipped the ring back onto her finger where it belonged and felt tears spring to her eyes. I do not understand. What kind of understanding? Nathan pulled out a chair and sat down, suddenly looking tired. I gave him the money you owed plus next month's rent, and I made it very clear that if he ever came near you again, he would regret it. He is a coward at heart, Drummond. Bullies always are. When someone stands up to them, they fold. You paid my rent? Sarah stared at him, torn between gratitude and mortification. Nathan, I cannot accept that. It is too much. I have no way to pay you back. I do not want you to pay me back, Nathan said. Consider it a favor for Thomas. He was a good man and he would not want his widow being exploited by trash like Drummond. But I cannot just take your money, Sarah protested. It is not right. Nathan leaned forward, his gray eyes intent on hers. Sarah, I am going to be blunt with you because I do not see the point in dancing around things. That room above the general store is not fit for you. It is cold, it is damp, and Drummond will find another way to make your life miserable no matter how much rent I pay him. You need to get out of there. And go where? Sarah asked helplessly. I have looked for work. There is nothing. I have no skills that anyone values, no money, no family. This is it for me. What if I offered you a job? Nathan said. Sarah blinked. What kind of job? I need someone to help me at my claim. Not mining, he added quickly, seeing her expression. I have the mining covered, but it is hard for a man alone up there. I spend half my time just trying to keep myself fed and my gear maintained. If I had someone to help with the cooking, the cleaning, the mending, all the things that take time away from actual mining, I could be twice as productive. You want a housekeeper, Sarah said slowly. In the mountains, at your claim, more or less, Nathan said. I have a cabin. It is not fancy, but it is solid and warm. I would pay you fair wages, enough to set aside some savings. You would have your own space, your own privacy. And you would be away from people like Drummond. It was a wild proposition. Sarah barely knew this man. Going off into the wilderness with him was the kind of decision a sensible woman would never even consider. But Sarah was running out of sensible options. I do not know, she said. What you are suggesting, it would not be proper. People would talk. People talk no matter what you do, Nathan said, especially in a town like this. But I give you my word that I would treat you with respect. You would be an employee, nothing more. If at any point you felt uncomfortable or wanted to leave, I would bring you back to town. No questions asked. Sarah looked down at her wedding ring, now back where it belonged. She thought about Thomas, about what he would want for her. He had been a practical man, and he would have told her to take the opportunity, to survive by whatever means necessary. But he also had been a protective man, and she wondered what he would have thought about her going off into the mountains with a stranger. Can I think about it? She asked finally. Of course, Nathan said. But I am heading back up to my claim at noon. That gives you a few hours to decide. If you want to come with me, I will help you pack your things and get you settled. If not, no hard feelings, but you should keep that ring somewhere safe. Maybe sell it yourself if things get desperate, but do not let Drummond get his hands on it again. He stood up, leaving some coins on the table to pay for their meals. I will be at the trading post loading my supplies. If you decide to come, meet me there by noon. If not, I wish you the best, Sarah Zimmerman. Then he was gone again, leaving Sarah alone with the most important decision of her life. She sat there for a long time, turning the ring on her finger, thinking about everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning, she had been at rock bottom, surrendering her most precious possession to a man who did not care about her suffering. Now that possession was returned to her, and she had an offer of employment that could change everything, it was risky. Nathan seemed like a good man, but she barely knew him. Going to his remote cabin meant being completely dependent on him, isolated from other people, vulnerable in ways she had never been before. If he turned out to be different than he seemed, she would have no recourse, no way to get help. But staying in Nome was its own kind of risk. She was out of money, out of options, and winter was far from over. Even if Drummond left her alone now, thanks to Nathan's intervention, she would still need to find work, to find some way to survive. And the truth was, there were worse men than Drummond in Nome, men who would offer her kinds of work that would break what was left of her spirit. Sarah made her decision. She went back to her room and looked at her meager possessions. Everything she owned in the world fit in a single trunk and a carpet bag. Most of it was Thomas's things, his clothes and tools that she had kept because she could not bear to part with them. She packed methodically, folding each item with care, saying a silent goodbye to this chapter of her life. When she was done, she carried her trunk and bag down the stairs. The general store below was open, and the proprietor, Mr. Hanson, gave her a curious look. Moving out, Mrs. Zimmerman? Yes, Sarah said. I found a position out of town. Good for you, Hanson said. though his expression suggested he had his doubts about what kind of position a woman like her might have found. But he helped her carry her trunk out to the street without further comment. Sarah looked at the clock in the store window. It was 11:30. She still had time, but just barely. She began the walk to the trading post, dragging her trunk through the snow with difficulty. It was heavier than she remembered, and she had to stop several times to rest. She was nearly there when she saw Drummond coming down the street toward her. Sarah's heart sank. She did not want another confrontation with her former landlord, not now. But Drummond spotted her and changed course to intercept her. "Leaving town, are you?" he sneered, though he kept his distance. "Running off with that mountain man?" "I am taking a job," Sarah said coldly. "Not that it is any of your business." "I know what kind of job a woman takes with a man in the wilderness," Drummond said, his voice nasty. "You are no better than the girls in the dance halls, just more hypocritical about it." Sarah felt her face burn with anger and humiliation, but before she could respond, a shadow fell over them. Nathan had appeared seemingly from nowhere, and he looked at Drummond with an expression that could freeze whiskey. "I thought we had an understanding, Drummond," Nathan said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made even Sarah take a step back. "I thought I made it clear that you were to leave Mrs. Zimmerman alone." Drummond paled but tried to bluster. "I was just making conversation. No law against that." "There is not any law against a lot of things in Alaska," Nathan said. "That works both ways. Now, I suggest you move along before I forget that I am trying to be civilized." Drummond looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Nathan's eyes must have convinced him otherwise. He turned and hurried away, casting one last venomous look over his shoulder. Nathan watched him go, then turned to Sarah. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Sarah said, though she was shaking slightly. "Thank you. Again." Nathan picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing, which given his size and obvious strength, it probably did not. "Is this everything?" "Everything I own," Sarah confirmed. "Then let us go. I have a sled with my supplies. We can load this on there and we will head out. It is about a 3-hour journey to my cabin, maybe a bit more with the snow. We should get there well before dark." The trading post was bustling with activity. Nathan had a large sled already loaded with sacks of flour, beans, coffee, and other provisions. There was also mining equipment, tools, and what looked like several thick furs. He secured Sarah's trunk to the sled with practiced efficiency, then helped her up onto the seat at the front. "Have you ever ridden on a dog sled?" Nathan asked. Sarah looked around, suddenly realizing something was missing. "Where are the dogs?" "I do not use dogs," Nathan said. "I pull it myself." Sarah stared at him. "You pull it yourself? But it must weigh hundreds of pounds." "About 400 with your trunk added," Nathan said matter-of-factly. "I manage. It is good exercise." He took up the harness, which was clearly designed for a man his size, and settled it across his chest and shoulders. The muscles in his back and arms bunched under his furs as he leaned into the weight, and the sled began to move smoothly across the snow. Sarah had to grip the edge of the seat to keep her balance. They left Nome behind, heading north and east into the mountains. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all white snow and dark rock and stands of stunted trees that somehow survived the brutal climate. The wind cut through even Sarah's warmest clothes, and she found herself grateful for the furs Nathan had included on the sled. He seemed completely unbothered by the cold or the exertion of pulling the heavy sled, his breath coming in steady clouds as he maintained a ground-eating pace. They traveled in silence for the first hour, Sarah too overwhelmed to make conversation, and Nathan seemingly content with the quiet. She watched the mountains grow closer, jagged peaks that promised even colder temperatures and harsher conditions than Nome. She wondered what she had gotten herself into, whether this was the biggest mistake of her life or the best decision she could have made under the circumstances. "We are almost to the first pass," Nathan called back to her. "There is a place to stop and rest just beyond it. We can have some coffee and something to eat before the final push." The pass was steep, and Sarah could see the strain now even on Nathan's powerful frame as he hauled the sled up the incline. When they reached the top, he stopped in a sheltered spot between two large boulders and helped Sarah down from the sled. Her legs were stiff from sitting, and she stamped her feet to get circulation back. Nathan built a small fire with swift efficiency, using dried wood he had brought with him, and soon had coffee brewing in a battered pot. He also produced some jerky and hard biscuits, which were not much, but Sarah ate them gratefully. The hot coffee especially was a blessing, warming her from the inside out. "You are probably wondering what you have gotten yourself into," Nathan said, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "It is a hard life up here. I will not lie about that. But it is honest work, and there is a kind of peace in the mountains that you cannot find in town." Why do you do it? Sarah asked. The mining, I mean. Is it for the gold? Nathan considered this. Partly. Every man who comes to Alaska is chasing gold to some degree. But mostly I do it because I like being my own master. I do not work for anyone else. I do not answer to anyone else. I make my own decisions and live with the consequences. There is freedom in that. Were you always a miner? Sarah asked, curious about this man who had so suddenly entered her life. No, I grew up in Oregon. Worked on my father's farm until I was 18. Then I headed north, did some logging, some trapping, some guiding, ended up in Alaska about 5 years ago and found I liked it better than anywhere else I had been. The mining is relatively new, just the past couple of years since the gold rush started. Before that, I was mostly trapping and living off the land. Do you have family back in Oregon? My father died 4 years ago. My mother passed when I was young. I have a sister who married a shopkeeper in Portland, but we do not keep in regular contact. What about you? Where did you come from before Nome? Missouri, Sarah said. A little town called Independence. My parents ran a boarding house there. They both died of influenza when I was 19. I met Thomas a year later. He was passing through on his way west and we fell in love. We got married quickly, maybe too quickly, but it felt right at the time. Then he heard about the gold in Alaska, and he convinced me we should come north and make our fortune. Do you regret it? Nathan asked. Coming to Alaska? Sarah thought about this carefully. I regret that Thomas died. I regret that we never got the life together that we dreamed about. But I do not regret the time we had, even if it was short. He made me happy. And I suppose Alaska is my home now, for better or worse. I do not have anywhere else to go. You could go back to Missouri, Nathan pointed out. And do what? Work as a servant in someone else's boarding house? At least here there is possibility, even if it is dangerous. Sarah smiled slightly. Besides, after surviving a winter in Nome, I figure I can survive anything. Nathan smiled back, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less severe. That is the right attitude. Alaska is not for the faint of heart, but it rewards those who are tough enough to stick it out. They finished their coffee and packed up the camp. The final leg of the journey was easier, mostly downhill and on more level ground. They followed a frozen creek through a valley, and then Nathan pulled the sled off the main path onto a smaller trail that wound through a dense stand of pines. Almost there, he called back to Sarah. My claim is just ahead. The cabin appeared suddenly, a solid structure built from thick logs with a stone chimney and a steeply pitched roof to shed snow. It was larger than Sarah had expected, maybe 20 feet by 30, and there were several outbuildings nearby, including what looked like a storage shed and a small stable. Smoke was rising from the chimney, which surprised her until Nathan explained. I have a stove that I keep going low when I am away. Uses a special design that burns slow and steady. Means I come back to a warm cabin instead of having to start from scratch. He unhitched himself from the sled and began unloading supplies. Sarah helped as best she could, though many of the sacks were too heavy for her to lift. Nathan seemed to appreciate the effort anyway, and together they got everything moved inside. The interior of the cabin was as solid as the exterior. There was a main room with the stove, a table and chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and a comfortable-looking bunk built into one wall. There was also a second smaller room that Nathan led her to. This can be yours, he said. It is not much, but it is private. I built it as a supply room, but I can move that stuff out to the shed. There is a bed frame. We just need to set it up and get you some blankets. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a single window that looked out on the forest. But it was warm and dry, and it would be hers alone, which was more than she had expected. It is perfect, Sarah said honestly. Thank you, Nathan. Thank me after you have been here a week and seen what the work actually involves, Nathan said wryly. It is not glamorous. They spent the rest of the afternoon getting Sarah settled. Nathan set up the bed frame with surprising gentleness for such a large man, testing each joint to make sure it was solid. He provided thick furs and wool blankets for bedding, and assured her that the room stayed warm because of its proximity to the main stove. He showed her where everything was stored, from food to tools to medical supplies. We are pretty isolated up here, Nathan explained. The nearest neighbor is about 5 miles east, and I only see him a few times a year. If you need help and I am not around for some reason, you head due south until you hit the creek, then follow it downstream back toward Nome. It is about a 4-hour walk, longer in deep snow. But honestly, you should not ever be here completely alone. If I am going somewhere that will take more than a few hours, you will come with me. Why? Sarah asked. Because Alaska is dangerous, Nathan said bluntly. Especially for someone who does not know the land. There are bears, wolves, the cold itself can kill you if you are not careful. I am not trying to scare you, just being realistic. You stay close, you do not wander off, and you will be fine. Understand? Sarah nodded. feeling the weight of how much her life had changed in just a few hours. This morning she had been destitute and hopeless in Nome. Now she was in a mountain cabin with a man she barely knew, completely dependent on him for survival. It should have terrified her, but instead, she felt something like relief. At least here she had a purpose. At least here she could work and earn her keep instead of drowning in debt and despair. They made dinner together that evening. A simple meal of beans and salt pork with biscuits. Nathan was a competent cook, clearly used to fending for himself, but he seemed pleased when Sarah took over some of the tasks without being asked. They ate at the rough wooden table, and Sarah was surprised to find herself hungry despite everything that had happened. "Tomorrow I will show you the mine," Nathan said. "It is about a quarter mile from here, following a trail. I have been working a claim there for 2 years now. It is good ore, steady production. Not enough to make me rich, but enough to live well and put some aside." "What do you do with the gold once you mine it?" Sarah asked. "Take it to the assay office in Nome when I have enough to make the trip worthwhile, usually every few weeks. They give me credit and I can draw on that to buy supplies or send money out to banks in Seattle or San Francisco. Some miners just hoard their gold, but that seems foolish to me. Gold does not do you any good sitting in a jar." They talked more as the evening wore on, and Sarah found herself relaxing in Nathan's presence. He was not much of a talker by nature, but when he did speak it was with thoughtfulness and intelligence. He had strong opinions on everything from politics to the best way to brew coffee, but he never pushed his views on her, always interested in hearing her perspective too. As night fell and the temperature dropped even further, Nathan banked the fire in the stove and showed Sarah how to adjust the vents to maintain heat through the night. "If you need anything, I am right out here," he said, gesturing to his bunk in the main room. "Do not hesitate to wake me if something is wrong." "Thank you, Nathan," Sarah said, "for everything. I know I have said it before, but I mean it. You did not have to help me, and you certainly did not have to bring me here. I will do my best to earn my keep." "I know you will," Nathan said, and there was something in his eyes that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. It was not anything inappropriate, just a kind of warmth and confidence that suggested he genuinely believed in her ability to handle this new life. Sarah retreated to her small room and changed into her nightgown, shivering in the cold air despite the warmth from the stove. She climbed under the furs and blankets and found them surprisingly comfortable. Through the thin wall, she could hear Nathan moving around the main room, the sounds of him preparing for bed. It was strange to be so aware of another person's presence after months of being alone, but not unpleasant. She looked at her wedding ring in the dim light that filtered through from the main room. "Thomas," she thought, "I hope you understand. I hope you would approve of this. I am trying to survive, and this seems like the best way forward." Selimic came surprisingly easily, probably because she was exhausted from the emotional turmoil of the day and the physical exertion of the journey. She did not wake once during the night, which was unusual for her. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in months, she felt safe. The next morning Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly in the cold and emerged from her room to find Nathan already up and cooking breakfast. The cabin was warm and bright, morning sun streaming through the windows and glinting off the frost on the glass. "Morning," Nathan said. "Hope you slept well. I made extra because I figured you could use a good breakfast." They ate together, and then Nathan took her outside to show her the property. In daylight, Sarah could better appreciate the setting. The cabin was situated in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. There was a stream nearby, currently frozen, that Nathan said provided water in the warmer months. He showed her the cache where he kept meat frozen and safe from animals, the woodpile that he said needed constant replenishment, and the small stable where he kept his tools and equipment. "I do not have any horses or mules," Nathan explained. "Too much work to keep them fed up here. Everything I need I can carry myself or pull on the sled." He led her along the trail to the mine, which was a shaft dug into the side of a hill. The entrance was reinforced with timber, and there were piles of ore and waste rock nearby. Nathan explained his process, how he worked the mine during the day, extracted the ore, and then processed it to separate the gold. It was back-breaking work, which made Sarah understand why he wanted help with the domestic tasks. "Your job is to keep the cabin running," Nathan said. "Cook meals, mend clothes, keep things organized. In the warmer months there is a garden plot behind the cabin that needs tending. We can grow some vegetables, enough to supplement our supplies. I also trap in the winter, so there will be furs that need scraping and processing." "Does any of that sound like something you can handle?" "I can cook and sew," Sarah said. "I have never tanned furs before, but I am willing to learn. And I helped my mother with her garden back in Missouri, so I know something about growing vegetable." "That is all I need," Nathan said. "Someone willing to learn and work hard. The rest we can figure out as we go." They fell into a routine over the following days. Nathan would rise before dawn and head to the mine after breakfast. Sarah would spend the morning cleaning the cabin, preparing meals, and learning the various tasks that Nathan needed done. In the afternoons he would return, often exhausted but always willing to teach her something new. He showed her how to properly prepare the wild game he brought back from his trap lines, how to repair his work clothes with strong even stitches, how to make bread from their limited supplies of flour and make it last longer. Sarah found herself settling into this new life more easily than she had expected. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way her life in Nome had never been. Every task she completed made a visible difference in their quality of life. Every meal she prepared was appreciated. Nathan was never effusive with his praise, but she could tell he was pleased by the way the cabin became more organized and comfortable, by the improvement in their meals, by the little touches she added like curtains for the windows made from scraps of fabric. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The days began to grow noticeably longer as spring approached, though winter still held firm in the mountains. Sarah learned the rhythms of life at the cabin, the sounds of the forest, the habits of the animals that lived nearby. She learned to read the weather by observing the sky and the behavior of the birds. She learned which tasks needed to be done daily and which could wait. She also learned about Nathan. She learned that he was patient and methodical in everything he did, never rushing but never wasting time either. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard sometimes, making her laugh when she least expected it. She learned that he was kind to animals, that he never killed more than he needed for food or furs, that he had a respect for the land that bordered on reverence. What surprised her most was how comfortable she became in his presence. Nathan never pushed boundaries or made her uncomfortable. He was unfailingly respectful, always giving her privacy when she needed it, always making sure she was warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. But there was also an ease between them that developed naturally, a sense of partnership that went beyond simple employer and employee. One evening, about a month after Sarah had arrived, they were sitting by the stove after dinner, Sarah mending one of Nathan's shirts, and Nathan working on repairing a piece of mining equipment. The wind was howling outside, a late winter storm that had blown in that afternoon and showed no signs of stopping. "Glad you are not still in that room above the general store," Nathan said quietly. "You would be freezing right now." Sarah looked up from her sewing. "I think about that sometimes, how different things would be if you had not been there that day. If you had not helped me, someone would have helped you eventually," Nathan said, but Sarah shook her head. "No, most people in Nome are too worried about their own survival to care about a widow with no prospects. You were different. You actually cared what happened to me, and I never understood why." Nathan set down his tools and looked at her directly. "Because Thomas was a good man, and he deserved better than to have his wife end up destitute and exploited. Because I could help, and it seemed wrong not to. And because," he hesitated, then continued, "because I could see that you were strong even when you did not see it yourself. You just needed a chance to prove it." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I was not strong that day. I was broken. You were beaten down but not broken. There is a difference. Broken people give up. You did not. You kept going even when you did not know how you would survive the next day. That takes strength, Sarah, more than you realize." She looked down at the shirt in her lap, blinking back tears. "Thank you for seeing that in me. Thank you for giving me this chance." They did not speak more that evening, but something had shifted between them. Sarah felt it, a deeper connection that went beyond the practical arrangement they had started with. She found herself noticing things about Nathan that she had not paid attention to before. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating. The strength in his hands when he worked. The sound of his laugh, rare but warm when it came. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression she could not quite read but that made her heart beat faster. She told herself not to be foolish. She was a widow still in mourning for her husband. Nathan was her employer and benefactor, nothing more. It would be inappropriate to think of him in any other way, especially so soon after Thomas's death. But her heart did not seem to care about propriety or proper mourning periods. Her heart was starting to respond to Nathan in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. Spring came slowly to the mountains, but it came. The days grew warmer, the snow began to melt, and the frozen creek behind the cabin turned into a rushing torrent. Nathan worked longer hours as the weather improved, taking advantage of the better conditions to make progress on his mine. Sarah started preparing the garden plot, turning over the soil that Nathan had hauled up from the valley below and mixing in compost. They made a trip to Nome together in early April to sell gold and buy supplies. It was Sarah's first time back in town since Nathan had taken her away, and she was struck by how different it seemed. Or maybe she was the one who was different. She walked through the muddy streets with more confidence, not the desperate, frightened woman she had been. People noticed her with Nathan, and she could see the speculation in their eyes, but she found she did not care as much as she thought she would. They saw Drummond outside the saloon, and he glared at them with undisguised hatred but did not approach. Nathan kept himself between Sarah and her former landlord, his presence a clear warning. They finished their business quickly and left town by early afternoon, both of them eager to return to the peace of the mountains. "Do you miss it?" Nathan asked as they left Nome behind. "Town life? Being around other people?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "It can be lonely up at the cabin when you are at the mine all day. But it is a different kind of loneliness than I felt in Nome. There, I was alone even when surrounded by people. Here, even when I am by myself, I do not feel quite as isolated. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Nathan said. "That is why I prefer the mountains. Quality over quantity when it comes to human connection." They returned to the cabin to find that a bear had visited while they were gone, knocking over the cache and making a mess. Nathan was philosophical about it, simply cleaning up and reinforcing the structure. "Part of life out here," he said. "Bears have to eat too. We were lucky it did not try to break into the cabin." As April turned to May, the landscape transformed. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors and the trees burst into new green growth. The garden Sarah had planted began to sprout, tiny green shoots that promised future food. The weather turned genuinely warm during the day, though nights were still cold. Nathan worked from dawn to dusk, determined to make the most of the good weather. Sarah found herself watching for his return each evening with increasing anticipation. She told herself it was just because she enjoyed his company, the conversations they had over dinner, the easy companionship they had developed. But she knew it was more than that. She was falling for Nathan, had probably been falling for him for weeks, and she did not know what to do about it. One evening in late May, Nathan returned from the mine looking frustrated. "Hit a difficult patch," he explained over dinner. "The vein I have been following took a turn, and I am having trouble tracking it. Might need to do some exploratory digging, which is time-consuming and might not pay off." "Is that a serious problem?" Sarah asked, concerned. "Not serious, just annoying. It is part of mining. Sometimes the gold is where you expect it, sometimes it is not. You adjust and keep going." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I am just exhausted, been pushing too hard lately. You should take a day off," Sarah suggested. "Rest. Let your body recover." Nathan looked at her like she had suggested he fly to the moon. "Take a day off? In the middle of good weather? That is not how mining works, Sarah. You work when you can, because you never know when conditions will turn against you. And you work yourself into exhaustion and maybe have an accident because you are too tired to be careful," Sarah countered. "That seems foolish to me." Nathan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He smiled slightly. "You are right. When did you get so wise?" "I have always been wise. You are just now noticing," Sarah said. Pleased that she had won the argument, Nathan did take the next day off, or at least he did not go to the mine. Instead, he spent the day doing lighter work around the cabin, repairing things that had been neglected, checking his trap lines, and generally catching up on tasks that were not as physically demanding as mining. Sarah enjoyed having him around the cabin all day. They worked together on various projects, and she found herself laughing more than she had in months. In the afternoon, they walked down to the creek together. The water was crystal clear and shockingly cold, fed by snowmelt from higher elevations. Nathan showed Sarah a spot where the creek widened into a small pool, perfect for bathing when the weather got warmer. "I am looking forward to a proper bath," Sarah said. "It has been nothing but sponge baths all winter. Another month or so and it will be warm enough," Nathan said. "I usually string up a canvas for privacy. We can make a schedule so we are not disturbing each other." They sat on a fallen log near the creek, listening to the water and the birds. It was peaceful and beautiful, and Sarah felt more content than she had in a very long time. She glanced at Nathan and found him watching her with that expression she could never quite read. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about how different things are now compared to 2 months ago," Nathan said. "How much better?" "Better because the cabin is cleaner and you are eating better food," Sarah teased gently. "Better because you are here," Nathan said simply, and the honesty in his voice took her breath away. Sarah did not know what to say to that. She looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring that still adorned her finger. "Nathan, You do not have to say anything," Nathan said quickly. "I know the situation is complicated. I know you are still mourning, Thomas. I am not asking for anything, Sarah. I just wanted you to know that having you here, getting to know you, it has meant a lot to me. More than I expected. Sarah looked up at him, at this strong, kind man who had saved her from despair and given her a new life. It has meant a lot to me too, she said quietly. You have been so good to me, Nathan, so patient and respectful. I do not know how to thank you properly. You do not owe me thanks. You have earned your keep 10 times over. This arrangement benefits both of us. Nathan stood up, offering her his hand. We should head back. Dinner will not cook itself. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and neither of them mentioned that they did not let go even after the trail became easy enough to walk single file. That night, Sarah lay in her bed thinking about Thomas. She had loved him, truly loved him, and his death had devastated her. But it had been months now, and while the pain had not disappeared, it had dulled to an ache instead of a sharp agony. She knew Thomas would not have wanted her to spend the rest of her life alone and grieving. He had been practical about such things, had made her promise before they came to Alaska that if anything happened to him, she would not let it destroy her. Was it too soon to have feelings for someone else? Society would say yes, that a proper widow should mourn for at least a year, probably longer. But Sarah was beginning to realize that the rules of society did not apply very well to life in Alaska. Here, survival mattered more than propriety. Happiness was too rare to ignore when it presented itself. The question was, what did she do about these feelings? Nathan had made it clear he cared for her, but he had also been careful not to push for more than she was ready to give. Should she take the risk of telling him how she felt? Or would that change the comfortable dynamic they had established, potentially making things awkward between them? Sarah did not have answers, so she did what she had been doing for months. She focused on the work at hand and let tomorrow worry about itself. June arrived with warm weather and long days. The garden flourished under Sarah's care, producing lettuce, radishes, and early peas. Nathan made excellent progress on his mine, finding a new vein that proved even richer than the one he had been following before. He was in good spirits, often whistling as he worked, and Sarah noticed he found more excuses to be around the cabin during the day, checking on things or taking breaks to help her with various tasks. They had fallen into an easy rhythm of physical affection that stayed just on the edge of propriety. Nathan would put his hand on her shoulder when he passed behind her. Sarah would brush imaginary dust off his shirt. They sat closer together at meals than strictly necessary. It was like they were both testing boundaries, seeing how far they could go before crossing a line. One warm afternoon in mid-June, Sarah was working in the garden when she heard shouting from the direction of the mine. Her heart leaped into her throat, and she dropped her tools and ran down the trail, terrified that Nathan had been hurt in a cave-in or accident. She burst into the mining area to find Nathan standing outside the entrance, holding something in his hand and grinning broadly. "Sarah, come look at this." She approached more slowly now that she knew he was safe, though her heart was still pounding. "What is it? Are you all right?" Nathan held out his hand and Sarah gasped. In his palm was a nugget of gold the size of a walnut gleaming in the sunlight. "Found it in the new vein I have been working." "There is more too, Sarah. This could be a significant strike." Sarah looked at the gold, then at Nathan's excited face and felt a surge of joy for him. "That is wonderful. You deserve this after all your hard work." Nathan closed his hand around the nugget and pulled Sarah into an impulsive hug, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. She laughed, caught up in his excitement, her arms going around his neck naturally. When he set her down, they were still close, his hands on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. The laughter faded, replaced by something more intense. Nathan looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch, his gray eyes dark and heated. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you." "What?" Sarah whispered, unable to look away from him. "I am falling in love with you," Nathan said bluntly. "Hell, I probably already have fallen in love with you. I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still mourning Thomas, and I know I promised this would just be an employment arrangement. But I cannot keep pretending that is all I feel. You have become important to me, Sarah, so important that the thought of you ever leaving terrifies me." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Nathan, I have been so confused. I did not know if what I was feeling was real or just gratitude for everything you have done for me. But it is real. I know it is real because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing you. Because when you are at the mine, I count the hours until you come back. Because when I imagine my future, you are in it. I am falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me because I do not want to betray Thomas's memory." "You are not betraying anyone," Nathan said gently, one hand coming up to cup her face. "Thomas is gone, Sarah. I am sure he was a good man and I am sure he loved you. But he would want you to be happy. He would want you to live, not just exist. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, then we deserve a chance to see where this goes." Sarah made her decision. She rose up on her toes and kissed him, tentative at first but with growing confidence as Nathan responded with enthusiasm. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and Sarah felt like she was coming home. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet, passionate, and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I know," Sarah said. "I could tell. I wanted you to, but I was afraid to make the first move. I am glad you did," Nathan said. "I was trying to be a gentleman and give you space, but it was killing me." They stood there for a long moment just holding each other, before Nathan finally stepped back reluctantly. "I should get back to work while the light is good. But tonight, after dinner, we need to talk about what this means, about where we go from here." "Yes," Sarah agreed, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. Tonight. She practically floated back to the cabin, unable to stop smiling. Everything felt different now, charged with possibility. She prepared dinner with extra care, wanting everything to be perfect. When Nathan returned that evening, they ate quickly, both eager to have the promised conversation. They moved outside after dinner, sitting on the bench Nathan had built outside the cabin door. The evening was warm and beautiful, the sun still high in the sky because this far north in June, full darkness did not come until very late. Nathan took Sarah's hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "I want to be clear about my intentions," Nathan said. "I am not interested in a casual relationship or a temporary arrangement. If we do this, if we move forward together, I am in it for the long term. I want you as my partner in every sense of the word. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Eventually, when you are ready, I want you as my wife. But I understand if that is too much, too fast." Sarah squeezed his hand. "It does not feel too fast, it feels right. I love Thomas and I will always carry him in my heart. But you are right that he would want me to be happy, he would want me to move forward. And I cannot imagine being happier than I am with you, Nathan. You are everything I need. You are strong and kind and patient, you make me feel safe and valued, you make me want to be better, to work harder, to build something meaningful. So yes, I want this too, all of it. Eventually. Eventually is good enough for me," Nathan said, leaning in to kiss her again. This kiss was slower, deeper, a promise of things to come. When they broke apart, Nathan asked quietly, "Do you want to keep wearing your wedding ring?" "I will understand if you do." Sarah looked down at the ring, the symbol of her love for Thomas. Then she slowly took it off and held it in her palm. "I think it is time to put this away," she said. "Not to forget Thomas, but to honor what we had while also making room for what we have now. Is that terrible of me?" "Not terrible at all," Nathan said. "It is honest and healthy. Thomas was part of your past and he will always be part of who you are. But I hope I can be part of your future." "You are my future," Sarah said with certainty. "I know that now." She went to inside and put the ring in her trunk, wrapped carefully in a handkerchief. It felt strange to have her finger bare after so long, but also liberating, like she was finally giving herself permission to move on. That night, Sarah slept better than she had in months, knowing that in the next room was a man who loved her and whom she loved in return. They had not discussed the physical aspects of their relationship yet, both content to let things develop naturally. But Sarah knew that would come in time. For now, it was enough to know they were committed to each other, that they had a future to build together. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Nathan were openly affectionate now, stealing kisses whenever the mood struck, holding hands as they walked, sitting close together in the evenings. They talked about their dreams and plans. Nathan wanted to expand his mining operation eventually, maybe hire some help so he could scale up production. Sarah wanted to improve the garden, maybe get some chickens so they could have fresh eggs. They made another trip to Nome in early July to sell gold and buy supplies. This time, Nathan made a point of introducing Sarah as his intended, making it clear to anyone who asked that they were courting with the intention of marriage. Some people looked scandalized, thinking it too soon after Thomas's death. But most people in Alaska understood that normal rules did not always apply on the frontier. They visited the small church in Nome and spoke with the minister about potentially being married in the fall. The minister, a kind man named Reverend Patterson, asked Sarah gently if she was certain she was ready to remarry so soon after being widowed. "I am certain," Sarah said firmly. "I loved my first husband and I love Nathan too. They are different kinds of love, but both real and both valuable. I do not see the point in waiting just to satisfy social conventions. Life is too uncertain, especially in Alaska. If Nathan and I want to build a life together, I want to start now, not months or years from now." Reverend Patterson nodded, satisfied by her answer. "Then I will be happy to perform the ceremony when you are ready. Just send word and I will make the arrangements." They left Nome that afternoon and returned to the cabin. That night, as they sat outside watching the midnight sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Nathan asked, "Have you thought about when you want to get married? Fall seems like a long time to wait." "It does," Sarah agreed. "What if we did it sooner? Late summer maybe? August?" Nathan suggested. "That gives us a couple more months to prepare, but we would be married before the first snow." "August sounds perfect," Sarah said. She turned to face him fully. "Nathan, I do not need a big ceremony or a fancy dress. I just need you and the promise we make to each other. Everything else is just details. Are you sure? Most women dream about their wedding day." "I have already had a wedding," Sarah pointed out. "This time I just want the marriage, the partnership, the life we are building together. That is what matters to me." Nathan pulled her into his lap and Sarah went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder. "You are amazing," he murmured into her hair. "I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day." "You saved me," Sarah said simply. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me my dignity back, my independence, my hope for the future, and now you are giving me your love. I am the one who should be grateful." "We can both be grateful," Nathan said, and kissed her soundly. They set a date for August 22nd, a little over 2 months away. Sarah threw herself into preparations, such as they were. She sewed herself a new dress from fabric Nathan bought on their last trip to town, simple but pretty in a shade of blue that matched her eyes. Nathan carved them rings from a piece of gold he had extracted from his mine, simple bands but made with his own hands, which made them infinitely more valuable to Sarah than any fancy rings from a jeweler. Life continued its steady rhythm. The garden produced more than they could eat fresh, so Sarah learned to preserve vegetables for the winter. Nathan's mind continued to be productive, the new vein living up to its early promise. They worked hard during the day and spent the evenings together, talking and planning and simply enjoying each other's company. As August approached, Sarah found herself getting nervous, not about marrying Nathan but about all the little details that suddenly seemed important. She wanted everything to be perfect, which was silly because nothing in Alaska was ever perfect. But Nathan, with his characteristic practicality, helped her keep things in perspective. "The only thing that matters is that we stand in front of Reverend Patterson and promise to love each other for the rest of our lives," he said. "Everything else is just window dressing." "I know," Sarah said, "but I want this day to be special, to be memorable." "It will be," Nathan assured her. "Because it is the day you become my wife, that is special enough for me." A week before the wedding, they made the trip to Nome together. This would be the last time as courting couple. The next time they came to town, they would be husband and wife. They spent the night in a hotel, separate rooms because Nathan insisted on doing things properly, and Sarah found herself missing him even though he was just down the hall. The next morning, August 22nd, Sarah put on her blue dress and fixed her hair as best she could with her limited supplies. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked healthy and happy, so different from the desperate widow who had surrendered her wedding ring 6 months ago. That woman had been broken and hopeless. This woman was strong and full of life, ready to start a new chapter. Nathan was waiting for her downstairs, and Sarah's breath caught when she saw him. He had cleaned up, trimming his beard and pulling his hair back neatly. He wore his best clothes, which were not fancy but clean and well-maintained. He looked handsome and solid and real, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was making the right choice. "You look beautiful," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You look pretty good yourself," Sarah said, taking his offered arm. They walked to the church together, just the two of them, no fancy procession or attendance. The church was small and plain, and there were only a handful of people there to witness the ceremony. Reverend Patterson, Mrs. Chen from the restaurant, who had agreed to stand as witness, and the marshal who happened to be friends with Nathan. The ceremony itself was simple and short. Sarah and Nathan stood before the minister and spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other, to support each other through whatever challenges life brought. When Nathan slipped the gold ring he had made onto her finger, Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be with this man building this life. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Patterson said with a smile, and Nathan did so enthusiastically, earning a chuckle from their small audience. They signed the marriage certificate, accepted congratulations from their witnesses, and then left the church as husband and wife. Nathan had arranged a small celebration lunch at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, just the five of them, and it was perfect. Not fancy, not formal, just good food and good company. As they prepared to leave Nome that afternoon, Sarah reflected on how different this trip was from all the others. She was no longer Sarah Zimmerman, the destitute widow with no prospects. She was Sarah Ashford, wife of Nathan Ashford, partner in every sense of the word. She had a home, a purpose, and a future filled with possibility. The journey back to the cabin was familiar now, and Sarah marveled at how much had changed since the first time Nathan had pulled his sled along this route, with her perched on top of the supplies. Then she had been terrified and uncertain, not knowing what awaited her. Now she was eager to return to the place that had become home. When they arrived at the cabin, Nathan surprised her by scooping her up in his arms and carrying her over the threshold. Tradition, he explained with a grin, and Sarah laughed and held on tight. That night was their first as husband and wife in every sense, and it was everything Sarah had hoped for. Nathan was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and loved. They came together with passion and tenderness, and Sarah felt the last pieces of her broken heart mend completely. She had loved Thomas, but what she had with Nathan was different, deeper somehow, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared experience that made their physical connection even more meaningful. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Nathan's bed, which was now their bed, and talked about the future. Nathan shared his dreams of expanding the mining operation, maybe building a larger house, establishing a real homestead instead of just a cabin. Sarah talked about wanting children someday, not right away but eventually, and Nathan's face lit up at the idea. "I would love that," he said. "Sons and daughters to raise in these mountains, to teach them about the land and how to respect it, to give them the kind of life where they are free to make their own choices." "Not too many at once, though," Sarah said with a laugh. "I need time to adjust to being a wife before I become a mother." "Fair enough," Nathan agreed. "We have time, all the time in the world." As summer turned to fall, Sarah and Nathan settled into married life. The transition was easy because they had essentially been living as partners for months already. The only real difference now was that they shared a bed and were open about their physical affection. Sarah found that she loved being married to Nathan, loved the intimacy, both emotional and physical, that came with the commitment they had made. The garden had to be harvested before the first frost, and Sarah spent several long days preserving everything they had grown. Nathan helped when he could, and they ended up with a respectable supply of canned and dried vegetables to supplement their winter stores. Nathan also brought home several deer and some smaller game from his hunting trips, and Sarah learned to process the meat for storage. In October, the first snow fell, signaling the start of another long Alaska winter. But this year Sarah was not afraid. She had warmth, food, security, and most importantly, she had Nathan. They spent the long winter evenings together, Nathan working on various projects and Sarah sewing or reading aloud from the handful of books they owned. They played cards, they talked, they made love, and they built the kind of deep companionship that would sustain them through decades. By the time spring returned in 1898, Sarah had been at the cabin for over a year. It was hard to believe how much her life had changed in such a short time. She thought about the woman she had been in Nome, desperate and alone, and marveled at the distance she had traveled both literally and figuratively. One morning in late May, Sarah woke feeling queasy. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling persisted for several days. It took her almost a week to realize what it might mean, and when she did, her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She waited until she was certain before telling Nathan. He had just returned from the mine one evening, tired but in good spirits, and Sarah met him at the door with a smile she could not contain. "What is you looking so happy?" Nathan asked, immediately picking up on her mood. "I have news," Sarah said. "Good news, I think, though it will change things." Nathan's expression became alert, focused completely on her. "What kind of news?" "I am pregnant," Sarah said simply. "We are going to have a baby, probably sometime in late November or early December based on my calculations." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, and Sarah worried that maybe he was not as ready for children as he had claimed. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared wildlife for miles around. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, as if suddenly afraid he might hurt her. "Are you all right? Is everything okay? Should you be working so hard?" The questions tumbled out of him, and Sarah laughed at his sudden anxiousness. "I am fine. Pregnant women are not fragile, Nathan. I can still do all the normal things, at least for a while. But yes, we will need to make some adjustments as I get further along." Nathan pulled her into a gentle embrace. "A baby," he said wonderingly. We are going to have a baby. Sarah, this is the best news I have ever heard." Over the following months, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Nathan built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small decorations into the sides. Sarah sewed baby clothes from soft fabric, making tiny gowns and blankets. They discussed names endlessly, finally settling on Noah for a boy and Sophia for a girl. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, Nathan became increasingly protective. He insisted on doing more of the physical work around the cabin, not wanting her to overtax herself. He was constantly checking on her, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. Sarah found his attentiveness both sweet and occasionally annoying, but she appreciated the care he showed. In early November, Nathan insisted they make a trip to Nome to talk to the doctor there. Sarah's pregnancy was progressing normally, but Nathan wanted professional reassurance that everything was fine. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Garrison, examined Sarah and pronounced her healthy and strong. "The baby should come sometime in the next month or so," Dr. Garrison said. "You are welcome to stay in town for the birth if you want, given how remote your home is, but based on what I can tell, you should have a straightforward delivery. If you have someone with you who has experience, you could manage at the cabin, if that is your preference." Sarah and Nathan discussed it and decided to stay at the cabin. They were comfortable there, and neither of them liked the idea of being in town for what could be weeks waiting for the baby to arrive. Besides, Nathan had helped with animal births plenty of times, and while he acknowledged that a human birth was different, he felt confident he could help if needed. They returned to the cabin in mid-November, and Sarah spent the next few weeks in a state of anticipation. She felt enormous and uncomfortable, eager for the baby to arrive. Nathan stayed close to the cabin now, doing only essential work at the mine and spending most of his time making sure Sarah had everything she needed. The labor started on a cold December morning, just as the sun was rising. Sarah woke Nathan with a hand on his shoulder, her face calm despite the pain she was clearly experiencing. "It is time," she said simply. Nathan, for all his usual confidence, looked momentarily terrified. Then his practical nature took over, and he sprang into action. He built up the fire, heated water, made sure they had clean cloths and everything else they might need. He helped Sarah through the contractions, letting her grip his hands so hard he lost feeling in his fingers, whispering encouragement when the pain became overwhelming. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the evening. There were moments when Nathan was genuinely afraid, when Sarah was so exhausted she could barely continue. But she was strong, stronger than even she had known. And finally, as darkness fell outside, their daughter came into the world with a lusty cry that announced her displeasure at the cold air. Nathan wrapped the baby in a warm blanket while Sarah lay back, exhausted but triumphant. He placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and Sarah looked down at her daughter with wonder. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn out to be gray like her father's. "Sophia," Sarah said softly. "Our little Sophia." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Sarah, looking at his wife and daughter with an expression of absolute contentment. "She is perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are both perfect." The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Sophia was a good baby, healthy and alert, and Sarah recovered quickly from the birth. Nathan was a devoted father, constantly wanting to hold his daughter, changing her when needed without complaint, walking with her for hours when she fussed. Sarah watched him with Sophia and fell even more in love with him, seeing this strong, tough mountain man turn into a gentle, patient father. Winter passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. But even in the exhaustion, Sarah found moments of pure happiness, watching Nathan singing softly to Sophia to help her sleep, the feeling of her daughter nursing contentedly, the three of them together in the warm cabin while snow fell outside. A complete family unit. Spring came again, and Sophia was 4 months old, already showing signs of her personality. She was curious and active, always wanting to see what was happening around her. Sarah strapped her to her chest in a carrier Nathan had fashioned, and took her out to work in the garden while Nathan was at the mine. She talked to her door constantly, explaining what she was doing, pointing out birds and flowers and the beauty of the mountains around them. Life fell into a new rhythm that included Sophia. Nathan still worked the mine, but he took more breaks to come back to the cabin and see his wife and daughter. Sarah managed the household and cared for Sophia, and she found that she loved being a mother even more than she had expected. Their evenings were spent as a family now, Nathan playing with Sophia while Sarah made dinner, all of them together in the comfortable cabin that had become a true home. Years passed in this way, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of Sophia's growth. She took her first steps at 10 months, spoke her first words shortly after her first birthday. She was a bright, happy child who loved the mountains as much as her parents did. Nathan taught her about the animals and plants, about how to read the weather and respect the land. Sarah taught her songs and stories, the beginning of letters and numbers. When Sophia was 3 years old, Sarah found herself pregnant again. This time the news was met with excitement from all three of them, though Sophia did not quite understand what a baby sibling meant. In the spring of 1902, they welcomed a son they named Noah, completing their family. Noah was different from Sophia, quieter and more observant where she was active and outgoing. But he was equally loved, and Sophia took to being a big sister with enthusiasm, always wanting to help with her baby brother. Nathan's mind continued to produce well, and they were financially secure. He expanded the cabin, adding on 2 rooms so each child could have their own space as they grew. He also built a larger storage shed and improved the garden area, making their homestead more substantial and permanent. Sarah sometimes thought back to that day in Nome, when she had stood in her shabby room and surrendered her wedding ring to Silas Drummond. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to a different person. That desperate widow had become this confident wife and mother, and the transformation was largely thanks to Nathan. He had saved her, yes, but more importantly, he had given her the space and support to save herself, to discover her own strength and capability. One evening when Sophia was 7 and Noah was 4, they all sat outside the cabin watching the sunset. The children were playing together, and Sarah was sitting with Nathan, her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Leaving Nome, coming up here, marrying me instead of trying to build a different kind of life?" Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Regret? Nathan, this is the best life I could have imagined. I have you, I have our children, I have this beautiful place. What could I possibly regret? I just want to make sure you are happy," Nathan said, "that you do not feel like you settled or gave up something important." Sarah took his hand and squeezed it firmly. "I am happy. I am so happy that sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and find out it was all a dream. You gave me everything when I had nothing, Nathan. You gave me hope and purpose and love. You gave me a family. There is nothing I regret, and there is nowhere else I would rather be." Nathan kissed her gently. "Good. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You and the children, you are everything to me." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sophia called out something about a fox she had seen at the edge of the clearing, and Noah ran to tell his parents about the interesting rock he had found. Sarah looked at her family, at the life they had built together in these wild mountains, and felt contentment settle deep in her bones. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness from a mountain man who had seen a desperate woman and chosen to help her, who had gotten back her wedding ring and moved her out by noon, changing the entire course of her life, who had become her husband, her partner, her love. Sarah Ashford knew she was blessed, and she never forgot to be grateful for every single day. More years passed, bringing changes and challenges but also joy and growth. Sophia grew into a strong, capable young woman who loved the mountains as much as her father did. She learned to trap and hunt, to read the land and survive in harsh conditions. But she also had her mother's gentleness and her father's sense of justice, making her someone people naturally respected. Noah was quieter but equally capable in his own way. He had a gift for working with his hands, creating beautiful things from wood and metal. He helped Nathan in the mine but also developed his own skills as a craftsman, making tools and furniture that were both functional and artistic. Nathan's mine eventually played out, as all mines eventually do, but by then he had saved enough to keep them comfortable. He turned his attention to trapping and hunting, guiding occasional parties of tourists who wanted to experience the Alaska wilderness. He was well into his 50s now, his hair more gray than dark, but he was still strong and vital. Still the man Sarah had fallen in love with all those years ago. Sarah herself had aged gracefully, her face lined with laugh lines and sun exposure, but her spirit as strong as ever. She had become known in the region as someone who could help with difficult births, having successfully delivered several babies for families in the area. She also grew medicinal herbs in her garden and knew how to treat common ailments, making her a valuable resource in a place where doctors were scarce. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary in the summer of 1918, surrounded by family. Sophia had married a good man named James, a trapper, who had come to Alaska 5 years earlier. They had 2 children of their own and lived about 10 miles away, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to have their own independence. Noah was courting a young woman named Emma who had come to Alaska with her family, and Nathan and Sarah expected they would announce an engagement soon. On their anniversary evening, after the celebrating was done and the children and grandchildren had gone home, Sarah and Nathan sat outside the cabin as they had done countless times over the years. The cabin had aged along with them, weathered but solid, its logs gray but its structure sound. 20 years, Nathan said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like we just got married yesterday. Other times it feels like we have been together forever. Both are true, Sarah said. That is the nature of time when you are happy. It passes quickly but also feels eternal because every day matters. Nathan pulled her closer. I have never regretted a single day of being married to you, Sarah. Not one. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The feeling is mutual, Sarah said. You saved my life, Nathan. Not just that day in Nome, but every day since. You have been my rock, my partner, my love. I could not have asked for a better husband or father for my children. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out in the northern sky. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. In the distance they could hear an owl calling, and closer by the creek burbling over stones. Do you ever wonder what happened to Drummond? Nathan asked idly. After we left? Sarah thought about it. Not really. I heard years ago that he lost everything gambling and left Alaska. Good riddance. But I am grateful to him in a strange way. Grateful? Nathan sounded surprised. If he had not been such a terrible landlord, if he had not taken my ring, you might never have noticed me. We might never have met properly. So yes, in a twisted way, his cruelty led to my happiness. Not that I forgive him for what he did, but I can acknowledge that good came from it in the end. That is a very philosophical way of looking at it, Nathan said with a chuckle. Me, I still would not mind punching him in the face if I saw him again, Sarah laughed. My protective mountain man. Some things never change. As they sat together under the stars, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about Thomas, her first husband, who had died too young but who had given her 2 years of happiness. She thought about the desperate winter in Nome, the day she had surrendered her wedding ring, the moment Nathan Ashford had walked into her life and changed everything. She thought about the risks she had taken, agreeing to come to this remote cabin with a man she barely knew. It could have ended badly. In a different story, Nathan might have been cruel or violent or dishonest, but he had not been any of those things. He had been exactly what she needed: strong, kind, patient, and true. She thought about their children, the family they had built together. Sophia and Noah were living proof that good could come from tragedy, that new beginnings were possible even in the darkest times. They were strong and capable and kind, raised with love and respect in this beautiful, harsh land. And she thought about Nathan, about the man who had become her everything, who had pulled a sled loaded with 400 pounds of supplies through the snow without complaint, who had confronted a bully to get back her wedding ring, who had offered her a job when she had no options, who had been patient enough to let her heal from her grief before pursuing a relationship, who had loved her faithfully for 20 years and counting. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Everything, Sarah said. Our whole life together. How lucky I am. How grateful I am that you were in Nome that day, that you knew Thomas, that you chose to help me. I am the lucky one, Nathan countered. You could have said no when I offered you the job. You could have been afraid of me or suspicious of my motives. You could have left after a few weeks. But you stayed and you took a chance on me, and you gave me the best 20 years of my life. 20 years and counting, Sarah corrected. We still have more ahead of us. Many more, Nathan agreed. I plan to be a very old man, sitting on this porch with my very old wife watching our great-grandchildren play in that clearing. Sarah smiled at the image. That sounds perfect. Exactly perfect. They went inside eventually to their warm bed in their solid cabin and fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of times before. Outside, the Alaska wilderness continued its eternal rhythms, seasons changing, animals hunting and hiding, the land itself breathing with ancient life. And in that cabin, two people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully, secure in their love and their life together. A mountain man and the woman he had saved. A widow who had found new love. A partnership built on respect and trust and passion that had grown deeper with every passing year. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic moments, though it had started with drama enough. It was a story of daily choices to love and support each other, of small kindnesses and quiet devotion, of building a life one day at a time in a beautiful, unforgiving place. It was a story of survival and hope, of second chances and new beginnings, of a landlord who had taken a wedding ring and a mountain man who had gotten it back, of a noon departure that had changed two lives forever. It was, in the end, a love story. The best kind of love story, because it was real and true and lasting, And every morning when Sarah Ashford woke in her mountain cabin, surrounded by the evidence of the life she had built with Nathan, she knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it to arrive at this place of contentment and joy. She had lost everything once in that shabby room in Nome, but she had gained everything that truly mattered here in these mountains, with the man who had become her whole world. The man who had seen her at her lowest and had offered not pity but opportunity. The man who had believed in her strength before she believed in it herself. Nathan Ashford had saved Sarah Zimmerman that day in Nome, but Sarah had saved him too in ways he probably did not even fully realize. She had given him a family, a purpose beyond just surviving and accumulating gold. She had given him someone to protect and care for, which fulfilled something deep in his nature. She had given him love and partnership and the kind of happiness that made every day worth living. They had saved each other, really, and they had built a life together that was worth more than all the gold in Alaska. As the years continued to pass, that truth only became more evident. They faced challenges, as all couples do. There were hard winters and failed hunts, illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of life. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other, never doubting that they would endure. When Nathan was 60 and Sarah was 58, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The celebration was large, with Sophia's family and Noah's family, now including Emma and their 3 children and friends from all over the region. The cabin could not hold everyone, so they set up tables outside and roasted a whole caribou over an open fire. As the evening wore on and the sun took its time setting in the long summer day, Nathan stood and called for everyone's attention. He was older now, his hair completely white, his movements slower, but he was still strong and vital, still the mountain man Sarah had fallen in love with. "I want to say something," Nathan announced, his deep voice carrying easily across the gathering. 30 years ago I married the best woman I have ever known. Sarah, you have given me everything that matters in life. You gave me these 2 beautiful children and these amazing grandchildren. You gave me a home and a purpose. Most importantly, you gave me your love every single day without fail. I am the luckiest man in Alaska, probably in the whole world, because you chose to spend your life with me. Thank you for 30 incredible years. I look forward to 30 more. Sarah stood and joined him, tears streaming down her face but smiling broadly. Nathan Ashford, you are the most stubborn, protective, wonderful man I have ever met. You saved me when I had nothing and gave me everything. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best partner anyone could ask for. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, which I would not have thought possible back then. Here is to 30 more years together, and whatever adventures they bring." They kissed while their family and friends cheered and clapped. Sophia and Noah both had tears in their eyes, having grown up watching their parents love and understanding how rare and precious it was. The party continued late into the light-filled night, filled with laughter and stories and music. When it finally ended and everyone had gone home, Sarah and Nathan sat together in their usual spot outside the cabin. "Do you think we will actually get 30 more years?" Sarah asked quietly. "That would make us both nearly 90. Maybe not 30, Nathan admitted. But however many years we get, they will be good ones. Every day with you is a good day, Sarah. I mean that." "I know you do," Sarah said. "That is one of the things I love most about you. You have never been anything but honest with me." They sat together until the sun began to rise again, marking a new day. The circle of life continuing, time marching forward, but their love remaining constant. Nathan and Sarah Ashford lived many more good years together. They watched their grandchildren grow and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays, always surrounded by family. They faced the challenges of aging with grace and humor, helping each other as their bodies grew less reliable, but their spirits remained strong. When Nathan was 72, he had a heart attack while working near the old mine site. Sarah found him and got him back to the cabin, and he recovered, but it was a warning that their time was not infinite. After that, they slowed down even more, spending most of their time around the cabin, letting the younger generation handle the more physically demanding tasks, but they were content. They had lived full, rich lives. They had loved deeply and been loved in return. They had built something meaningful that would continue through their children and grandchildren. On a warm summer evening, when Nathan was 78 and Sarah was 76, they sat together outside the cabin as they had done thousands of times before. The cabin was old now, nearly 50 years since Nathan had built it, but still solid. Like them, it had aged but endured. "Do you remember the day we met?" Nathan asked, his voice rougher now with age but still warm. "Of course I remember," Sarah said. I nearly ran into you outside the trading post. I was so lost in my misery that I did not even see you." "I saw you," Nathan said. "And I saw something in you that day, even through all your pain and fear. I saw strength and dignity and beauty. I knew I had to help you." "Best decision you ever made?" Sarah teased gently. "Best decision I ever made," Nathan confirmed seriously. "Everything good in my life came from that choice. You, our children, our grandchildren. All of it traces back to that moment when I decided to approach a sad widow outside a trading post and see if she needed help." Sarah took his hand, both of them showing age spots and wrinkles now, but the grip still firm. "Best thing that ever happened to me too. You gave me my life back, Nathan, my hope, my future, everything. I love you so much." "I love you too," Nathan said. "Always have, always will." They sat together as the sun set, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The mountains stood eternal around them, witness to their long love story. The creek sang its endless song. The forest whispered with life. And Nathan and Sarah Ashford sat together, hand in hand, hearts entwined, grateful for every moment they had been given, and ready for whatever came next, knowing that they would face it together as they had faced everything for nearly 50 years. Their love story, which had begun with a desperate woman surrendering her wedding ring and a mountain man who had gotten it back and moved her out by noon, had become the stuff of legend in their region. People told the story to illustrate that good things could come from terrible situations, that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that second chances were real and worth taking. But for Nathan and Sarah, it was not a legend or a story. It was simply their life. The life they had built together, one day at a time, with love and commitment and unwavering devotion to each other. And it was, without question, a life well lived.